The Life of David Livingston, Part 31. Mr. Stanley, rather contrary, it would seem, to his expectations, found Dr. Livingston an exceedingly companionable and agreeable gentleman. He had been led to suppose that the explorer of Africa was haughty and reserved in manner. Instead, he found him hospitable, most generous, and as open and unaffected as a child. He deferred reading his own letters brought by Mr. Stanley until he had the general news of the world during the long period in which he had been lost. Then he read of home and gave the commander of the Herald expedition an account of his explorations. The result of these interviews is contained in the letter dated at Bunder, Ujiji on Lake Tanganyika, December 26, 1871, from which we largely extract as follows. The goal was one, finis coronat opus. I might here stop very well, for Livingston was found. Only the Herald, I know, will not be satisfied with one story, so I will sit down to another, a story so interesting because he, the great traveler, the hero Livingston, tells most of it himself. Together we turned our faces towards his tembe. He pointed to the veranda of his house, which was an unrailed platform built of mud, covered by wide overhanging eaves. He pointed to his own particular seat on a carpet of goatskins spread over a thick mat of palm leaf. I protested against taking his seat, but he insisted, and then I yielded. We were seated, the doctor and I, with our back to the wall, the Arabs to our right and left and in front, the natives forming a dark perspective beyond. Then began the conversation. I forgot what about, possibly about the road I took from Unanyembe, but I am not sure. I know the doctor was talking and I was answering mechanically. I was continuing to indomitable, energetic, patient, and persevering traveler at whose side I now sat in Central Africa. Every hair of his head and beard, every line and wrinkle of his face, the wan face, the fatigued form, were all imparting the intelligence to me which so many men so much desired. It was deeply interesting intelligence and unvarnished truth these mute but certain witnesses gave. They told me of a real nature of the work in which he was engaged. Then his lips began to give me the details, lips that cannot lie. I could not repeat what was said. He had so much to say that he began at the end, seemingly oblivious of the fact that nearly 6 years had been to be accounted for. But the story came out bit by bit, unreservedly, as if he was conversing with Sir R. Murchison, his true friend and best on earth. The man's heart was gushing out, not in hurried sentences, in rapid utterances, in quick relation, but in still and deep words, a happier companion, a truer friend than the traveler I could not wish for. He was always polite, with the politeness of a genuine kind, and this politeness never forsook him for an instant, even in the midst of the most rugged scenes and greatest difficulties. Upon my first introduction to him, Livingston was to me like a huge tome with a most unpretending binding. Within the book might contain much valuable lore and wisdom, but its exterior gave no promise of what was within. Thus, outside Livingston gave no token, except of being rudely dealt with by the wilderness, of what element of power or talent lay within. He is a man of unpretending appearance enough, has quite composed features from which the freshness of youth has quite departed, but which retains the mobility of prime age just enough to show that there yet lives much endurance and vigor within his frame. The eyes, which are hazel, are remarkably bright, not dimmed in the least. Though the whiskers and mustache are very gray, the hair, originally brown, is streaked here and there with gray over the temples. Otherwise, it might belong to a man of 30. The teeth above show indications of being worn out. The hard fare of Londa and Manyema have made havoc on their ranks. His form is stoutish, a little over the ordinary in height, with slightly bowed shoulders. When walking, he has a heavy step of an overlooked and fatigued man. overworked and fatigued man. On his head he wears a naval cap with a round visor with which he has been identified throughout Africa. His dress shows that at times he had to resort to needle to repair and replace what travel has worn. Such is Livingston externally. On the inner man, much more may be said than the outer, as he reveals himself bit by bit to the stranger. A great many favorable points present themselves, any of which, taken singly, might well dispose you towards him. I had brought him a packet of letters, and thought I urged him again and again to defer conversation with me until he had read the news from home and children. He said that he would defer reading until night. For the time he would enjoy being astonished by the European and any general world news I could communicate. He had acquired the art of being patient long ago. He said he had waited long for letters, that he could well afford to wait a few more hours. So we sat and talked on the humble veranda of one of the poorest houses in Ujiji, talked quite oblivious of the large concourse of Arabs, Wanganawana and Wajiji, who had crowded around to see the newcomer. The hours of that afternoon passed most pleasantly, few afternoons of my life more so. It seemed to me that as if I had met an old friend, an old friend. There was a friendly and good-natured abandon about Livingston which was not lost on me. As host, welcoming one who spoke his language, he did his duties with a spirit and style I have never seen elsewhere. He had not much to offer, to be sure, but what he had was mine and his. The wan features which I had thought shocked me at first meeting, the heavy step which told of age and hard travel, the gray beard and stooping shoulders belied the man. Underneath that aged and well-spent exterior lay an endless fund of high spirits, which now and then broke out in peals of hearty laughter. The rugged frame enclosed a very young and exuberant soul. The meal I am not sure, but what we ate 3 meals of that afternoon was seasoned with innumerable jokes and pleasant anecdotes, interesting hunting stories in which his friends Webb, Oswald, Vardun, and Cumming were always chief actors. You have brought me life anew, he said several times, so that I was not sure but that there was some little hysteria in his joviality and abundant animal spirits, but I found it continued during several weeks. I am now disposed to think it natural.